What's up, guys? It's your boy Mizzy. I'm here today to go over Ohio State schedule, man. Get into predictions. College football is coming up soon. I know every fan base is excited. Not just, of course, everybody know I'm a Bama fan, but this year I'm paying attention to way more college football. I always watch the SEC, but guys, I really want to get into just watching the Big Ten. Just covering college football as a landscape more. So first of all, Ohio State last year, they lost their last two games. They lost versus Indiana in the championship game. Then they lost to Miami. Two great teams. You lost to the two teams that ended up in the championship. So neither was like a bad loss, but the struggle you seen in the Indiana and Miami game for Ohio State was the O line. You see, and like I say, both had dominant D lines, Indiana and Miami. So, saying your offensive line is struggling versus them two teams is really not a big thing. But when you watch Ohio State, you seem like, okay, they need to strengthen the O line for the upcoming season. So, first of all, guys, Ohio State is replacing 8 starters on defense. And, most schools, you'll be like, dang, that's a lot of people to replace. But one thing with Ohio State is always going to have talent. They're always going to be loaded. And, that's one thing about a lot of these top schools. We may not know the names at first, but there will be a guy to step up. Now, either he, better than the last guy, worse, or in the middle somewhere, there will be somebody to step up in that position. But you did lose Caleb Downs and you did lose Sonny Styles to the NFL. So them are two big pivotal pieces. And like I say, especially Caleb Downs controlling the defense, calling out the plays, really being just a key person on that defense to get everybody in line. But one thing, like I say, you still had that man, Jeremiah Smith, probably, I would say, if he's not the best college football player, of course the quarterback position more important, but as far as football players, he would have to be up there, top 3, top 2. Like me personally, I would say Jeremiah Smith is the best college football player. But like I said, last year, Jeremiah, he had 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns receiving. So I think that's a guy you could check mark right there. Even though you're replacing a lot of the starters on defense, check mark Jeremiah Smith. And then, like I said earlier, the O-line, it's how would that play? We know that Ohio State always has a dominating defensive line, and I expect nothing less this year. Julian Sand, he's a check mark as well. The only question I have about Julian Sand, will he take a leap? He was real good last year, very accurate, one of the most accurate quarterbacks in college football. The only question I have, I think last year, sometimes when you watch Ohio State, at certain times he should have took more chances down the field, and sometimes he played it safe, which is good. But sometimes when you're in those big games like an Indiana and a Miami, you have to take more chances. You got to kind of risk it more. And like I said, we'll see. Julian Sand's a good quarterback, so we'll see what leap he takes this year. And like I said, man, with Jeremiah Smith, when you have him as a security blanket, that's always great for a quarterback. That's one of the biggest pivotal things, like, either having a great wide receiver, running back, that can take pressure off the quarterback. And then, Arthur Smith being there, that should improve the team some. He's new to the offense. I think he's going to implement a more NFL pro style. You also have Bo Jackson in the backfield, a great running back, which I think even last year he was underutilized a little bit. I think this year you'll see him a lot more. So guys, like I said, I think Ohio State has a great team. And like I said, we'll get into the schedule prediction right now, guys. All right, guys, let's get into it. So first of all, Ohio State, their first game is playing Ball State. We're not worried about that game at all. We know for certain they're beating Ball State. The second game, and it's interesting, the second year they have a big game early in the year. They're at Texas. The only reason, guys, that I think Ohio State will lose this game, of course, Texas has a great team, especially the roster loaded with talent, just like Ohio State. But I feel earlier in the year, Texas has a more complete roster at that point. Now, later in the year, we'll see. But this right there, at that game, I got Texas winning. I think Arch will come out play better, like I say, being at home. I think it'll probably be a close, I don't know, maybe a 3-point game. I can see Texas pulling out, maybe winning off a field goal or something. Then you're playing Kent State. Obviously, a win, waste no time there. We know Ohio State not losing to no Kent State. Then versus Illinois. Illinois is a team that's, they're an okay team. Sometimes they play above their heads and play better, but Ohio State obviously winning it. Then at Iowa. This is a game that, Iowa, one thing about them, their offense always struggle, but they have a good defense always. But like I say, I think Ohio State will win it. Then versus Maryland, like I said, I think that game they'll definitely win. Then you're at Indiana. So now, like I said, you're at Indiana. Kurt Snyder, you lost last year to this team in the Big Ten championship. So like I said, looking for some revenge here. Indiana has a new quarterback with Josh Hoover. Like I say, and new faces. Fernando Mendoza, he's gone to the NFL. So like I said, this game, the only reason I'm picking Ohio State to lose this game is because I think that, and I'm not, some people don't realize just because you lose a game in the regular season doesn't mean that at the end of the year you won't make it further than that team. So like I said, I got Indiana pulling out this victory strictly because they're at home. Because college football is really important in that road advantage. Now, I think if Ohio State was at home, I would lean towards Ohio State. Would I be surprised if Ohio State beat Indiana? No. But I think Kurt Snyder, he's smart. He knows Josh Hoover is a good quarterback. I think he would lean on the running game in that game and find a way to pull out that victory at home. One thing, Indiana kind of has to win some of these games because Indiana's schedule this year is not as tough as some of the other top competition. Then they play at USC. It's a lot of people this year, guys, high on USC. Lincoln Riley, of course, he's been there a couple of years now. Me personally, I'm not high on USC just because I haven't seen nothing yet to make I don't understand where we getting this USC just finna compete all of a sudden. I know USC is a big program. I seen they picked up some players in the transfer portal. And Lincoln Riley, he knows offense, but I haven't seen nothing yet to make me think he's going to take this substantial step to the next level. So like I say, I got Ohio State bouncing back after an Indiana loss and beating USC. Then they play Oregon. I know a lot of people, Oregon is people championship picks. I haven't picked a champion for the season yet, but me personally, I think Ohio State will beat Oregon with 2 losses. If it's going like the way I think they lost to Texas and Indiana, you can't suffer a third loss because when you get down to the end of the season, all them losses matter. So like I say, I got Ohio State beating Oregon. Strictly because I just think Oregon, a lot of times when they play these more physical teams, Oregon is, especially Oregon defensive line is really physical. Their defense is really physical. But I don't know how Oregon offense will match up against Ohio State's D-line. Ohio State D-line causes a lot of havoc. That's how they win a lot of games, guys. And then, like I said, who in college football, period, but who does Oregon have to cover Jeremiah Smith? Now, of course, this year, guys, with Tate being gone to the NFL, who will step up in Tate's role and, kind of take pressure off Jeremiah Smith a little bit. We know he will always be double covered, automatically. But like I said, I got Ohio State winning that game versus Oregon. Then, guys, they're playing Northwestern. I think they'll win that. Then they're at Nebraska. Obviously, they're beating Nebraska. Then they finish up the year playing Michigan. This game right here, of course, it's a big rivalry. everybody knows Ohio State and Michigan. Michigan always puts up a pretty good game, even if sometimes the score doesn't dictate that. Michigan makes it tough because, like I say, rivalry games. We know it's like Alabama versus Auburn. Auburn can have a horrible year all year, but when they play Alabama, it's something about the team that just play above. They play up to the competition. But I think this year, because like I said, if Ohio State already has 2 losses, there's no way they can lose versus Michigan and hope to get in the college football playoffs. I think this year, guys, we'll see a lot of teams 10-2, 9-3. And when you're splitting hairs between that, it all them wins matter. That especially who you beat. Especially like because if you lost to a team, say like a lesser team, that's gonna count against you a lot, guys. We seen it with Notre Dame. We seen it with other teams when you lose to teams that you're not supposed to lose to. Even if you win some of those big games, the college football committee, we all know it's like it's kind of up in the air. They do what they want to. So like I said, I got Ohio State beat Michigan, so I got Ohio State going 10-2 on the year. Obviously, I think with 10-2, they will make it to the college football playoffs. And Ohio State, they're a team that's always loaded and will be competing for a championship for the foreseeable future. So guys, like I say, that's my video for Ohio State Buckeye fans. Let me know in the comments. Let me know if you think you got your team going to the championship. Who do y'all think y'all will lose to? Do you think you'll go undefeated for the season? That's a possibility too. But anyways, guys, like, comment, subscribe, share. Catch you next time.